Fans, welcome to this week's Sports Chat. A little bit to talk about as spring sports start to wind down for the Cougars. Soccer team had a massive win Friday over Scott County.
Yeah, I believe that puts them at 6-2-1 on the season. Probably got a couple of games left. They don't participate in the postseason yet. Will not start that until next year due to the JV rule with the TSSAA. Plus the all-sports, all levels, your first couple of years as a new sport.
We're at Hardin Valley.
JV.
When they opened, every sport had to do that. All at once.
Baseball team tonight's senior night as we're filming this. They have a few more. They even have more home games. They have a home game Saturday.
But those are all makeup games, whereas this was the scheduled senior.
This is scheduled senior night, so they will have it. Hopefully they can get a couple of wins this week, get into the district tournament. Softball, the same position, trying to get into the district tournament. Bunches of rainouts, canceled games, and there's pretty much they're playing every day that it doesn't rain. But as any of you know, it rains almost every day at some point here the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it's been rough on those two. Soccer, track, fishing, whatever. You just go in the rain. Unless it's coming an active thunderstorm, you play or do your sport anyway. But those two,
the nature of the infield,
just too much mud in the infield to be able to play in those situations. So they're struggling. They're making good. They're getting there. And they'll just get in what they can for the season. It's kind of rough. One thing about it, pretty much everybody in East Tennessee has been affected almost equally with the rain. It probably has rained a little more here than it has down in the south, but it usually does. It's the nature of our location. They're doing the best they can. Christy Stanley from the softball team Friday assigned to the University of Cumberland. We'll be there to get you some pictures and some stuff of that and talk to Christy a little bit.
Now, Christy's actually had a pretty good career as a pitcher.
She started the last couple of years.
She saw a lot of relief action as a freshman.
Even as a freshman and a sophomore, she got quite a few starts and they did come in as a relief. And as Coach Monger told me, and I mentioned my Meet the Cougars column about her, she's on the field no matter what.
But she's also a really good shortstop.
The second baseman is where Coach Monger moves her to usually when she moves out. The game we were watching the other day, she came in and they used a relief pitcher and moved her to second. She does play those spots in the infield, and I have to say her bat, she's pretty good with it. She had some base hits in the game we were watching the other night. Actually, Monger said she's on the field. She's healthy. She's on that.
She's one
pitching field and whatever.
Yeah, of course. Back home working at Carroll Library, her grandmother used to bring her and her younger sister in, and they were always in a state of getting ready to go to softball. Yeah, Christy's just an excellent athlete. She's actually benefited from our Little League softball program.
She's played for 7-8 years or more now. I mean, nearly a decade of her life. Well, that's paying off for her. Well, she used to go to college and play. I know that that's what she wanted to do. Excellent student, got a high GPA. And most of the athletes, that's the consistency of the people I've interviewed this year in Campbell County. They're all, B, A, or just straight A students. Really good, high level. It's an impressive amount of work. They put in so much time in practice.
Some of them even take college classes.
You play 2 and 3 sports. Some of them play one sport, but they're never not doing something involving their sport for the most part.
And a lot of them are involved in other clubs like student council, beta club.
They're doing stuff, just a lot of activities, and hats off to them to be able to maintain those high GPAs. Under the circumstances they do, with just near constant work of some kind, or practice or games. And they told me about how they be on the bus late at night doing it, or staying up till midnight, 12:30 to get it done. They get it done. They maintain excellent attendance records, and otherwise they wouldn't get to play.
Now, the one thing that has been consistent this year, even with the weather, is just the dominance of Cougar track.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a lot of good. We spoke about them in the past episodes, and they're keeping on, rolling on.
Had their home meet, and they ran the boys and girls mile together. Gracie Faulkner beat a number of the boys.
She beat at least 60% of the boys, and of course, easily won. And Gracie's not even that happy, particularly with her performance lately. She wants to pick it up and get her personal record before the year's out, which is a 5:32 mile. The fastest guy mile I saw this year was 5:01 by comparison. So Gracie's up there. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast that males are going to have faster times and all these things because they're built more to run. But Gracie, she exceeds expectations. She finishes, especially in that mile race. It's not uncommon for her to finish 200 to 300 meters ahead of the other females in the race and have 1,600 meters.
Yeah, it's a dominating performance.
I mean, even the second place ones. She actually lapped some of the other people in the race, which was 400 meters ahead in the race direction. The Dawson siblings are just extremely good athletes. Dakota, really high jumps. He's probably
next week we'll have some information about him in the decathlon and Rachel Nelson in the pentathlon.
Yeah, they were doing some of that stuff earlier, and the Dell Leg is coming up here really soon.
One of my favorites to go to.
I think it's this weekend. So if you're seeing this before Saturday, April the 26th, head down to Anderson County, go to the Dell Leg. You can see a lot of good Cougar action there. And it's watch the Dawson, watch Gracie, watch Mackenzie West in the long jump. Gavin Cooper run the mile. They're really good athletes, really high level.
Watch Austin Raines throw the discus and Rawson Lebanon throw the shot.
So we mentioned throwing the shot. She's probably going to get sectional qualifier this year. You have a ton of people that are right on the water line to qualify for sectionals, which is of course where you set your qualifying times for state in those meetings. And Cougar, just as a team, is doing extremely well. As I said, they're finishing the top three on the girls and boys side in almost every meet they enter. Some with 15 or 20 teams.
And also, spring practice. The football team posted a picture on social media yesterday of their spring practice schedule. It's not far from
it's about 10 days out.
Yeah. You get some exciting action in the spring scrimmage in Powell, which is going to be a very dynamic team this year.
Yeah. Of course, we know Rodney from days long past, and his offenses at Clinton, and we watched his offenses at Warburg, and then of course his offenses at Jacksboro. And just an excellent coach, excellent motivator of kids, and technical. So he'll turn Powell back into the powerhouse that Powell was the last few years before all the disarray took over. And if he can't, Powell's just a hopeless program.
It is. I mean, it's one of those things. I hope Justin Price retires as the King County School System as head football coach. If something happens to those guys leave, to me, Rodney Ellison is the obvious choice to replace
Oh,
them.
yes. Yeah. I honestly, when the Prices got it, it couldn't have worked out any better than seeing the Prices get this job. But I would have been all for Rodney getting it then because he was dominating at Warburg at the time, and Warburg's falling apart without him.
And Warburg plays some really tough competition in Oneida, Coalfield, Oliver Springs,
Coalfield's been a
Hamilton.
state championship contender the last few years.
Oneida's a long time pal.
Yeah, I mean, but Rodney went in there, and Warburg hadn't had football success in decades.
Hadn't been ranked in the state since the 50s.
He put them in the top 10 of the state. He got them in the playoffs. Got them in the top 3, 4 of their division. But, I expect you'll see that on a bigger scale in Powell. He's got more tools to work with, more athletes. He'll find a guy that can throw the ball. He'll teach you how to play the quarterback position because that's what Rodney does. And his wide receivers will be running Chris Brown, his offensive lineman.
I'll tell you this. He also is a really good running back coach. You know who he coaches a running back? Deborah Young.
That's his days at Bearden. He's just been through a lot of good programs. He's coached under a lot of good coaches. And he coached under Coach Bruce. He's at Bearden.
He coached under Lydia Young at Bearden.
Bearden was a powerhouse during those Bill Young years. So Rodney's been around, and he knows what he's doing. And it'll be a fun scrimmage. I think that was in mid-May. We'll have an exact posting for you when it comes up. I'll tell you about it on here when it comes up. If you follow Coach Price on any of the social media networks, you'll see a visual of the Cougar football page. Ron Parker didn't seem to tweet that.
Also on a Cougar front today, if anybody picked up the news signal, Trey Torres was one of the all-prep extra team, and he's the first Campbell County player to ever make that.
not surprising. It's not been around since Campbell County's prior glory days. We had, dominating players. Trey was the player of the year in the district. So him making the all-pro extra team is only natural. He's dynamic. Of course, we know of his exploits in every form of sport that he's undertaken so far in his career. Just great athlete. He gives everything he's got out there. He doesn't slack off. He just, not surprising he would make that in the prep extra bowl. He was prep extra player of the week candidate several times throughout the year in football and basketball. And I say that coach's all district selection is not a big surprise. Congratulations to Trey for that.
And of course, on the UT front, orange and white game is coming up. It's more of a show than it is anything. Peyton Manning's going to be there. A ton of the great wide receivers, Marcus Nash and Peerless Price from, the days that I was in UT are going to be there.
Two of Manning's favorite targets during his time on him. You're not going to get anything out of it. Some guy, if somebody rushes for 150 yards in a game, who knows? He may be great next year, he may not play. I've seen people rush for 150 yards and not even play the game in fall. The main thing you want to do is not get anybody hurt. Let the fans have a good time. Score as much as you can, give a little hope. They want to see the new guys out there that enrolled midterm come in and do well. And one of the big things about it, it's a big recruiting weekend, and a big recruiting weekend for the basketball team, it turns out. Hadn't heard much on the basketball recruit since Rick Barnes took over, but it turns out there's going to be about 4 or 5 visitors in. We've had 5 official visits left that we can use, and I believe we're using 4 of them this weekend. And it's Kyle Alexander. He's a 6'10", 225-pound forward from Canada, I believe, actually.
I read about him earlier today.
Missouri offered him. Iowa State, I think, offered him. Several other high-profile schools have offered him scholarship, and he's coming in. Matt got him Emmanuel Azundu. I'll use his last name. Don't quote me on that one. That might have been his first name. His name's Azundu, I-Z-A-N-D-U, I believe. He committed to Charlotte. And he's a top 75 player in the country, 4-star. Charlotte fired the coach, so he has decommitted. He's out. He's got it down to Tennessee, who's getting a visit. Kentucky's expressing some interest in him, which is unfortunate because Kentucky may get it because they've lost all their other top targets. Just about it. Several high-profile schools are. Look, I mean, he's a 6'10", top 75 player that suddenly coming in the market, maybe a 6'11". So, hot competition for that. This is where Barnes has got to prove, his recruiting ability. He wasn't just, I can get any good player to come to Texas because it's Texas and we've got a bunch in our backyard. It's where you've got to get some players in here now. Because that's what Barnes does. I mean, he recruits. He's not going to win any battles with many good coaches in the X and O department. I mean, you watch Bruce Pearl Chris Lawson was a great college player, especially under Bruce Pearl when he thrived. You watch Bruce take a bunch of Chris Lofton and a few other not that highly touted recruits and put it all over Barnes 2 years in a row with his Texas club, who had Kevin Durant on every one of those years.
I hear he's pretty good in that other league.
But that's the kind of players that Rick Barnes has been shown capable of getting. He's had several one-and-dones. He's even got a freshman from his last team that's projected as a top 10 NBA pick right now. Rick Barnes gets one-and-done type players. He gets elite recruits. At least he did at Texas. And I like on Rick Barnes, as I've said before, he takes those elite recruits and sometimes he makes a tournament, or makes a tournament most of the time. Sometimes he wins a game, sometimes he wins 2. But outside of 1 year with Durant and 1 year with Marcus Aldridge, who's also an NBA All-Star big man, and pretty dominant NBA player, he's never made it past the Sweet 16 in 20 years of coaching, basically. I said he made a pretty good run with those 2, but I mean, he couldn't even make the Final Four with Kevin Durant on his team. And DJ Hawkins, both of whom were lottery picks. So, I mean, I criticize Calipari for not being able to win when he didn't. Calipari deserves it because Calipari's a Jaguar. And Kentucky fans make a lot of excuses about this year, but they had the most loaded team of talent that you're ever going to see assembled in college anymore with the one and done. You're not going to see juniors or seniors in there. And they were as loaded as it gets. They still didn't win that title. That's what Calipari did. only title, of course, was with Anthony Davis, who turns out he may be the best player in the NBA here.
Anthony Davis is really good. I hate to admit that.
He's just a transcendental type player. I mean, that's the kind of player it took, though, for Cal to get that first title. He was a player who just head and shoulders above everybody else in the college game. The year he was in the league, or in the NCAA. With merely first round and #1 draft choice, if he just doesn't get it done, he's going to get out-coached when the talent's even close to equal or experienced.
Well, yeah, that's how you can say whatever else you will about Coach K. Man can coach. And that's what's got him top.
I love Rups Rafters. I love to go read it because it's the egos of Kentucky fans, first off. They can't see how any player would go anywhere else. I mean, they down talk programs like Kansas and Duke. I mean, Kentucky, you've won a lot of titles, but half of your titles were between 1948 and 1951. And it turned out that Adolph Rupp was running one of the most corrupt basketball programs ever assembled. You had to vacate entire seasons, multiple entire seasons during Rupp's era back there. And none of you will ever admit it. And none of you like to talk about it and think he's the greatest thing ever. But when multiple seasons, you're the only program I know that has 2 coaches that have had multiple seasons completely wiped off their record books for cheating scandals. And you embrace both of them and love them, but then complain about Duke cheating. Supposedly, who's never been caught for cheating at all. But it's hilarious. Coach K's won 5 titles now. He's won titles in 3 different decades. He's the winningest basketball coach in history. And frankly, I mean, UCLA aside, they had that great run with Wooden, where they had 8 titles in like 9 years and 10 titles overall. That was in a short span. That was 50 years ago. You didn't play that many tournaments. As I said, half of Kentucky's titles came with no. There was 18 NCAA tournaments, and Rupp was cheating as much as anybody's ever cheated in any sport ever. Duke has done all this, and is the 2nd or 3rd winningest program of all time now, maybe 4th. And they've done it in the modern era of college basketball. He's won his titles in the era of great, competition, shot clock basketball, where you couldn't let the air out of it. That's just what he's done. Duke is probably the greatest program of all time at this point. And I know that'll make Kentucky fans mad, but it's just true. They did it in multiple decades now of extremely high level competition, not a short burst like Kentucky and like UCLA did it. They just did it for decades. And Duke, I mean, you point some historical significance. From 1959 to 1969, even Duke was a dominant program. And I think they won the most games in college basketball program besides UCLA in that decade. But they just didn't win titles because UCLA was winning all the titles during that time. Nobody was beating UCLA. Duke's had multiple. This run by Coach K, and I don't like Duke. I can't stand it. That's what it is. Kentucky has benefited greatly from being in the SEC, and for 60 years, nobody in the SEC besides Tennessee sometimes really cared very much about basketball.
And that's changed.
Kentucky would just roll through the league, get tons of wins, pretty much like they do now. I mean, it's changing somewhat, but basketball will never be the priority here like it is in North Carolina and the ACC. Duke has just did it for over a much higher level of competition.
Oh yeah, no, the ACC, that's basketball.
That's what they love. But I mean, they have stepped up now. And Billy Donovan may leave. That's the latest thing coming out too. He may go to Oklahoma City and coach the Thunder. Never know. He's turned into a big job. So took one and then left it. A lot of good coaches in the SEC. Ben Howell's been to a Final Four. Rick Barnes has been to a Final Four. Calipari Chiefs, no coach ever.
Bruce Pearl's back in action.
Bruce Pearl's.
Avery has potential.
We'll see what Avery can do in Alabama. Maybe nobody can. Frank Martin's a really good coach. I mean, South Carolina's just a whole of a program that never turns around really for anybody. But he's still a good coach. He's one high level. Mike Anderson's got Arkansas playing really well. There's many good coaches in the SEC right now as there have been in a long, long time. And hopefully the product on the floor will start improving with it. LSU got a terrible coach. I mean, he can't coach a lick in the game. But he's a recruit machine. They have the #1 recruit class right now. They surpassed Kentucky with that. Another thing that's killing me, they don't understand how to go and play for.
Well, because I've been to Lexington and Baton Rouge, and to me that's a no-brainer. Granted, my priorities are a little different, but Baton Rouge is a cool town. Lexington, not so much.
Oh, you got the red light district right there near campus.
Oh, the taco stand.
A lot of prostitutes walking around and they're making eggs. I mean, fat prostitutes, like,
Yeah, not good prostitutes, not Vegas prostitutes.
It's crazy. Check out Ropes Raptors if you're not a Kentucky fan and go and laugh at them. It's hilarious with the cell phone. They think they're better. One of them had a thread. They couldn't understand why he wanted to go to St. John's because New York had nothing on Lexington. New York City had nothing on Lexington off.
Seems legit.
That's the way they see the world. As they're jackals. But I guess that's about all we have.
Yeah, fans, we will be back next
We'll be back
week.
here at Papa John's studio next week.